Oh, hey! How are you doing today? Well, I know it's been a couple of weeks. I've been working pretty non-stop lately. Um, Finally got a day off where I could actually sit down and do something. So, I'm going to read to you from Genesis chapter 13. I am going to use this Bible. Okay? Not for any extra reasons, just, I don't know, something about it today I felt like it was important. Okay, now, Genesis 13. Abram went up from Egypt, he, his wife, and everything he had, and Lot with him, into the Negev. Abram became wealthy with much cattle, silver, and gold. As he went on his travels from the Negev, he came to Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai, where he had first built the altar, and there Abram called on the name of Adonai. Lot, who was traveling with Abram, also had flocks, herds, and tents, but the land could not support their living together because their possessions were too great for them to remain together. Moreover, quarreling arose between Abram and Lot's herdsmen, the Canaanites, and the Perizzite were then living in the land. Abram said to Lot, "Please, let's not have quarreling between me and you, or between my herdsmen and yours, since we're kinsmen. Isn't the whole land there in front of you? Please separate yourself from me. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left." Lot looked up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered everywhere before Adonai destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Like the garden of Adonai, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zorah, so Lot chose all the plain of the Jordan for himself. And Lot traveled eastward thus. They separated themselves from each other. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, and Lot lived in the cities of the plain, setting up his tent near Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were evil, committing great sins against Adonai. Adonai said to Abram, after Lot had moved away from him, "Look all around you, from where you are, to the north, the south, the east, and the west. All the land you see I will give to you and your descendants. Forever. And I will make your descendants as numerous as the specks of dust on the earth, so that if a person can count the specks of dust on the earth, then your descendants can be counted. Get up and walk through the length and breadth of the land, because I will give it to you." Abram moved his tent and came to live by the oaks of Mamre, which are in Hebron. There he built an altar to Adonai. That particular chapter is not necessarily a difficult one to interpret. It really isn't. But I will go through what other commentaries have said, just like I normally do, just so you can get a perspective from someone outside of, your pastor or, anything else. Alright? So, now, from my NASB, I'm going to read what MacArthur has to say. Chapter 13, verses 1 through 4. Significant after the disastrous situation in Egypt, Abram journeyed back to where he had erected an altar, and there he again worshipped. 13:5. Flocks and herds. Wealth in the ancient world was measured not by land owned, but by the size of one's herds and the possession of silver, gold, and jewels. Chapter 13, verses 6 through 7. Not unexpectedly, conflict occurred because of crowded conditions and limited grazing space. Both uncle and nephew had occurred much of the slow trip from Ur via Haran and Egypt to the Bethel Ai region. Verse 7. Perezite, a Canaanite tribe. Verse 8. We are brothers. Abram's whole reaction in resolving this strife between the two households and their personnel betrayed a different Abram than seen in Egypt, one whose attitude was not self-centered, waiving his right to seniority. He gave the choice to his nephew. Verse 9. Is not the whole land before you? Abram gladly called on Lot to select for himself what he desired for his household and flocks. After Lot's choice had been exercised, then Abram would accept what was left for him. Perhaps this did much to restore in the eyes of the servants Abram's integrity and reputation. Verse 10. Before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, when Moses was writing, the devastation of that region had long before occurred by a dividedly initiated catastrophe. Like the garden of the Lord, like Egypt. This twofold appraisal of the Jordan Valley, with its meadows on either side of the river, to which Lot was a strongly attracted, highlighted its lush and fertile nature. Moses reading this to the Jews about to enter Canaan and likening it to the Garden of Eden referred hearer and reader to God's revelatory description of it, liking it to an obviously well-known and well irrigated region of Egypt, referred then to a place the Jews had likely known well in their sojourn in Egypt. Zor, a town located at the end of the Dead Sea, whose name means small place. Chapter 13, verses 11 and 12. An excellent yet selfish choice from a worldly point of view, but disastrous spiritually because it drew him into the wickedness of Sodom. Verse 13, the men of Sodom were wicked exceedingly. Lot's decisions put him in dangerous proximity to those cities whose names would become a byword for perversion and unbridled wickedness. Their evil is the theme of chapter 19. Verses 14 through 17. With Lot gone, the Lord reaffirmed his covenant promise with Abram. Strikingly and unmistakably, the Lord deeded the land in perpetuity to Abram and his descendants, whom he declared would be definitely innumerable. Chapter 13, verse 18. The oaks of Mamre, a distinctively large grove of trees owned by Mamre the Amorite, located 19 miles west of Jerusalem at Haran, whose elevation exceeds 3,000 feet, built an altar. It was devoted to the worship of God. Okay, so that's MacArthur. Oh. No. That's so weird. Okay. So I'm going to go through this one, but it doesn't have a whole chapter in there. It starts from verse 11. And then it goes from there. But let's see what it still has to say. Sorry. Genesis 13 contains the first of three accounts involving Abram and Lot. Genesis 13:2 through 18, chapter 14, 1 through 24, chapter 18, verse 16 through 9, chapter 18, verse 16 through chapter 19, verse 38. Lot provides an example that contrasts Abram, the man of faith, with Lot, a man of the world. Moses used such contrast in individuals like Cain and Abel, Ham and his brothers, Isaac and Ishmael, and Jacob and Esau, to distinguish the promised line from those who opposed or rejected it. The quarreling between Lot's people and Abram's people became Abram's people, because there was just not enough room for both of them in the same location, was just the beginning of the strife that would continue throughout the remainder of Israel's history with the Moabites and Amorites, Lot's descendants. To stop the quarreling between them and their people, Abram suggested that he and Lot part ways. As the head of the clan, Abram had every right to choose which region he would take and which region Lot would have, but he graciously allowed Lot to choose which region he wanted. Lot saw that the plain of the Jordan Valley was fertile, like the Garden of Eden, so he chose it for himself. So Lot journeyed east, away from Abram. As with Adam and Eve, Cain and those are at the Tower of Babel. Eastward can denote a separation from the blessing of God. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, the place of God's blessing. However, Lot lived outside the land of blessing, living in the cities of the plain of the Jordan Valley, while setting up his tent toward Sodom, apparently for this herdsman to tend to his flocks. Both Sodom and Gomorrah were cities in the Jordan Valley that became proverbial types of wickedness and God's judgment. God's judgment. Biblical writers used Sodom and Gomorrah as models of evil. This means that Lot chose to settle down and dwell with the wicked who were sinners before the Lord. Lot was willing to settle his family and servants with the wicked in order to profit materially. Although Lot did not participate in their wicked ways, he would come to regret this choice. Yeah. I'm just going to basically stop from there and just talk. Okay. Abram and Lot, Sodom and Gomorrah. Choices. That's basically what this is about. Choices. What kind of choices do you make? Who do you follow? Why do you make those choices, and why do you follow said person or being? Abram did have every authority to take whatever land he wanted. But why give a choice to Lot. Lot was not necessarily a calm, collected, I'll take whatever I can kind of person. Lot was more of a hothead. Wanted what he wanted. He knew he was an adult. He could do whatever he needed to do. Now, he knew about God. He knew about, the angels and what to do and what not to do. But he was still technically a hothead. So why would Abram just say, go ahead and pick? Because, and this is insight from someone who has lived 44 years. Those who are younger, when you were younger, you thought you knew it. You thought you had all the answers. Only to come find out later on in life that you ain't even remotely close to having any answers. Abram knew that giving Lot a choice was a better option because he knew how Lot would react. Well, why do you get to pick? Why do you get to choose this side over that side? Why is it your choice? And we could all say, well, I am the head of the house, so therefore I get to choose. But instead of having an argument, right, he says, let's not quarrel, let's not fight. Pick a spot. You see that more from someone who is mature, who is okay with, taking whatever lands in their lap. Now, we're going to find out everything that happens with Lot and the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, but we already get that little bit of information that those places are evil, and good old Lot chose to face his tent towards them. Maybe he just liked being able to see the city. Maybe. But honestly, I think Lot wanted them to see him. Look at that dude, man. He's got all this power. He's got so much. Look at all his sheep and cattle, and look at how amazing his tents are. That's what I think. I could be dead wrong, but that is what I think. So, why does God bless Abram with, I'll give you everything that you can see? Because he had already made a promise to him. Right? And now that Lot's not there to listen in, and this is why I believe that Abram knew that it was better to give Lot a choice Because God waited for Lot to leave before God completely gave Abram everything. God knew that Lot wasn't going to be able to handle it. God knew that Lot was going to make a choice. And that choice is going to hurt him. So, in this chapter, we see the kind of person that both of them are. Lot is a hothead who thinks he knows everything, and Abraham is the guy who realized that he knows very little. So what do we take from this? I take patience. I take love and compassion. I take an understanding. And just knowing the idea that God blessed Abram just for the simple fact of letting Lot have the first say. It's like there's nothing better. Because Abram gave Lot a choice, and God gave Abram a choice as well. You can be the head of the house, you can be the man of all power, or you can trust in me, and I will give you whatever you need. Now that's something that I've been struggling with. Trust in me, and I will give you everything that you need. Trust in me, and I will give you everything that you need. We wake up every morning. Praise God. Every breath that we take, praise God. Every breath that we don't take, praise God. There's that saying that, we all hear now, let go and let God. Or that song, trust in the Lord, all the earth let us sing. Power and majesty, praise to a King. It's difficult to live a life of trust when you have none. You have no faith in it. It's even more difficult when that faith that you have to have, that trust, is in a heavenly being that you have not physically spent your time meeting. Have you met Christ? Possibly, but not in a physical form, right? So then you ask yourself, what kind of man am I? Or what kind of woman am I that I have the ear of Christ, of God? I'm going to show you something. I want you I want you to see this, because this right here, what I'm about to show you, is faith. That is my wonderful dog, Zoe. She has enough faith and trust in me that she could sleep right here on my leg. So much so that she even puts her paw up so that way if I move, she knows. How many of us have that kind of faith in God? How many of us have that much trust that no matter what happens, we could fall asleep right there? Abram allowed Lot to just take whatever he wanted and gave to God everything else and said, "It's yours." And God blessed him for it. God blessed him for having enough faith that he would let Lot take the better part of the land. I love my Zoe. She's a cuddler. I love her a lot. She has enough faith in me that she could fall asleep. No quarrels, no qualms. And she has enough faith in me that she will come to me when she needs help. Chapter 13 isn't that difficult to decipher. But when you really look into the answers, what really is going on in this verse, and keep in mind what the person in that last book said about Moses giving a contrast, I don't agree with at all. Because it wasn't Moses who wrote. Okay. Moses physically wrote, but God gave Moses the words to write down. So God is telling the story, not Moses. God is helping us to see the truth. He wants us to understand that when we have enough faith in our God, in Jesus Christ, there's nothing that can stand in our way. There is nothing that can't be done. I hope you all have a blessed day, a blessed week. And if you get a chance, take a moment with God and then step outside and find someone who has no clue who God is. God bless you.